Okay, so Norm, now that we're on the other side of the Trump
Oh my
election
God, Michael,
trial,
I missed you.
I know, I miss you too, my brother. It's great to have you back on the show. Now, a reminder for our audience. Trump was found guilty on all 34 felony counts brought against him in the Manhattan District Attorney trial. Our Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg. But, before we get into the specifics of the first ever criminal conviction of a former president, tell me what you thought of the trial overall. You see, I know because when I was on the stand for those 4 days, for the 21 hours,
Yes.
I saw you there in the courtroom. All right, so I know that you have
I saw you.
bird's eye.
I saw you seeing
Yeah, I know
me.
you saw me, right? But I know you had a bird's eye view of this.
Every day.
I want to know what you thought of the trial overall and its outcome. Did you appreciate, like I did, how Judge Merchan ran the courtroom? And in your opinion, were there any real surprises at all here?
What I thought of the trial overall, and I said this over and over again, was that it made me proud of the American idea because not only did that trial run so well, the judge, the jury, the prosecution, the defense lawyers did a very good job. I wrote an essay about that.
You thought the defense lawyers did a good job?
I did. The Trump can't complain that he did not get a good defense. The witnesses, Michael. And you know, when people talk about performing public service, I know because you and I are friends. We talk all the time. When you're not testifying, we did a hiatus while you were testifying, which is appropriate. You shouldn't be talking to people about the case. You were so disciplined. So putting the trial to the side, you know, you and the other witnesses, unlike the jury, they did their duty. They were terrific. They paid attention, but you're very identifiable. Me too. The MAGA crazies, you know, were out for me as well. So I thought the press did a very good job by and large in the courtroom. Some of the ones not in the courtroom didn't understand what was going on. So that's what I thought of the trial. Nobody's above the law, but Michael, you know this. Nobody's below the law either. That's part of what I was so glad the jury accepted your truthful explanation that Judge Rakoff, this to me was one of the most important aspects of the trial. Judge Rakoff wrote a whole book, Why Innocent People Plead Guilty. You never denied your campaign finance crime, but you were pressured by unscrupulous prosecutors who threatened your family into pleading to some other stuff that you would have fought, or you normally get a civil resolution or a slap on the wrist.
I actually talked about that, and Todd Blanche,
you did.
who I
was there.
You know,
I was there.
And did you see the look on the jury's face when Todd Blanche opened that up, even after Susan Hoffinger, the prosecutor that was questioning me on direct, gave me an opportunity to explain it. But Todd Blanche gave me that opportunity a second time, which is why I call him a sloat, the stupidest lawyer of all time, right?
He was not the favorite of the jury. You were watching them, but I could watch them for hours, right? You had to look at Susan, you looked at them, you looked at the jury. He was the least favorite. They liked Hoffinger. They liked Beauvais. Beauvais might have been the favorite of the defense lawyers for the jury.
Really?
Beauvais, he has a very good, it's like an insinuating a little bit of a mean style. He made one, there were several mistakes that the defense lawyers made that we'll talk about. But I thought on the whole, they did a good job. The biggest mistake was in how they handled you. Stormy was also mishandled. There was a big
bringing on Bob Costello.
That was a catastrophe. That was a catastrophe.
So tell me though, what did you think?
So that's
the outcome?
Well, I thought justice was done. To me, the most important part of the outcome was that the prosecution rolled the dice. They took a gamble. Since the day I came and met with you at the beginning of 2019, who is this Michael Cohen? Like the Michael Cohen that people saw in the stand, they were surprised. I'm like, no, Michael gets a little hyper at times, as do I. But that thoughtful, decent, emotional person that you saw, that's the real Michael Cohen. I was shocked also when I met you. I was shocked. That's Michael Cohen.
By the way, you've been saying that now literally since 2020, since I started.
But the jury, but they believed you. Okay, Michael, they believed you. And
you know who else, by the way, Norm, not to interrupt you, but you know who else believed me? Judge Engoron, right?
Yeah. But Judge Mershon, because when they made a motion at the end to set the case aside, notwithstanding the verdict because you lied, did you hear what the judge said to them? He said, like, incredulously, are you saying I believe that Michael Cohen committed perjury? Like, don't put those words in my mouth. And they're like, oh, no, Judge, denied. He smacked them down.
Good. But what I was saying is it's not only Judge Mershon that believed me. It's not only the 12 independent jurors that believed me, but the case preceding it, the New York AG case. Judge Engoron, page 43.
Yeah, Michael Cohen told the truth. Yeah.
Right. The same thing with the Mueller team. The same thing with the great Norm Eisen, right? When you were doing the impeachment. No, it's true.
I did. I told them all. The guy's telling the truth. But that's the thing that, to answer your question, that's the thing that that's what I was about to answer your question. The thing that was so important, Bragg rolled the dice. He only gave the jury one choice to find felonies here. The cover-up was for one crime and one crime alone: election interference. Under New York Code, Section 17152, a conspiracy to influence an election by unlawful means. And I said, even the subtitle of my book, Donald Trump's first election interference trial, this case was about democracy, and you were fighting for democracy. So that made me very proud that the jury saw through that very effective defense, and as good a job as the lawyers did, there was no denying Donald Trump interfered with an election, and he covered it up. And when he did that again? In 2020. And when he's threatening to do that again in 2024. And when he's going to repeat it again if he gets elected, 2026 and 2028 and beyond. That's the fundamental tenet of his movement. And of this new autocracy. They don't accept the core idea of American democracy. Let us have free and fair elections. So that was the historic aspect of this trial, other than, everybody believed my friend Michael.
But, when all of this started, Norm, one of the things you and I had spoken about, as we're now going to be going to the Supreme Court in the unconstitutional remand, where I've been talking to you, and I know you've been speaking to my lawyers, we now
I'm going to write a big article about this. It shows the
weaponization of the Justice Department.
But it's not the weaponization. Yes, it's like a projection. They're projecting when they claim weaponization. Right. They had a whole set of hearings in Congress. I testified for the Democrats about the weaponization. I'm like, you guys are weaponizing.
And they did.
Not your adversary. You are weaponizing. So I was very proud. I was very proud to write the afterword for your book. They kind of distorted this in the trial, Revenge. They made it seem like it was a book about the revenge you were seeking. It was the revenge that was sought against you. That's the revenge that's in that book. Yeah. And so I'm going to expand that for a piece, and I'm interviewing everybody. And now that you're out of the trial, I'm going to interview you too, Michael.
Good. Happy to do it. Now, let me ask you a question. Did you appreciate how Judge Merchan ran the courtroom. I did.
Yes.
There's something about him which is very unusual. He's incredibly judicious. He to me reminds me very much of like the biblical character of King Solomon, right? He's very Solomonian in the way his stature and the way he responded immediately. I mean, it wasn't like, well, let me think for a second about the objection, right? He was right on it. And I believe that every one of Judge Merchan's decisions were incredibly thoughtful, and they were judicious and they were accurate. And I had so much respect for him. And, I have a real problem with the Justice Department, obviously, right? But there was something about Judge Merchan and his courtroom that I turned around and said, I'm going to stay off this podcast, which is so important to me, my political beatdown podcast. I stayed off of Twitter, off all social media completely until such time as there was a verdict. And I did that out of respect to Judge Merchan.
You did, and thank you for doing it, Michael. It was good for the system. If I may say so, it was good for you. And I'm not sure, the jury didn't go for all those attacks on you. Obviously, maybe if they'd been out for a week, you could say, oh, they had some questions. But coming back in a day and a half, I have a piece going up at Just Security. They had to believe Michael Cohen. There's no way they could have come back.
Because Norm, do you remember the first time that we met? What did I show you? I showed you documentary evidence, and you looked, and I remember your face exactly the first time we were sitting in that, what was it, like a library of some sort? It was a private library in that club, not too far from me. And I remember you looked at me and you were scratching your head and you were like, wait. That's what it says. He goes, you said it's like, you are accurate. It's backed up by documentary evidence. Imagine you're the jury here and someone's telling you Michael Cohen's lying. Okay. Anybody can say anything about anyone. But there's hundreds of documents that the prosecutors had put into evidence. Forget about the 19 preceding witnesses.
Yeah.
The documentary evidence, the emails, the text messages, the recordings, the DMs, they all validated and corroborated what I was saying. So you're right. The jury had no choice but to come back and say guilty because I, like others, told the truth.
Well, I will never forget, because I cross-examined you, Michael. I was not gentle on you.
No.
And we went over the now I like to think I cross-examined you in a courteous way. I think, by the way, Todd Blanche would have done much better if he had been more, you can make your points without screaming and shouting and being overruled. The jury didn't like that.
No.
The jury didn't like that.
You know what else the jury didn't like, Norm? The fact that he made a mistake 5 different times and opened up the door for me to explain it to the jury. Like when he turned around and he goes, well, your partner, Gene Friedman. No, sir. No. Gene Friedman and I were never partners. You were never partners? No, sir. We were never partners. Right? I mean, and then I was like, would you care for me to explain? And, well, Norm, you'll remember because you were there in the courtroom when I turned around and I said, no, sir, you're wrong. You're just wrong.
Yeah.
And then he gave me the opportunity to explain it. And the jury was like, this guy's right. He goes, they are not. They did absolutely no due diligence. But, I want to move on for a quick second here, Norm, and ask you about this, because the sentencing is set now for July 11th. Just days ahead of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee.
Why did these geniuses, why did they ask for a July sentencing? Why?
I have no idea. But that's where Trump will likely become the official nominee of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
So here's the question to the great Norm Eisen. What do you predict sentencing will look like? And do you think that he's going to end up doing time?
I know what it should look like, and I wrote in the New York Times this week that I believe the former president should get a jail sentence. I think if that happens, it will be a sentence of less than a year. Ruth Marcus, who I often debate and disagree with, is my friend. She thinks that it could be even, I've thought 6 months. She thinks even less. But I think a jail sentence of whatever length, plus some probation, some community service, some restitution, will send a powerful message to America about the seriousness of this. Of course, Donald Trump won't serve jail, right? That's going to be suspended pending his appeals. So in any event, we're talking because Merchan is attuned to the fact that he's a current candidate for the presidency. So he's no way Merchan's going to put him in on that sentence. And if he did, the First Department would reverse it. But I think it's important because it's the most serious falsifying business records case in New York history. And people who commit serious violations of falsifying business records do go to jail in New York. They do. My research indicates I encompass 10,000 cases in the research from my book, Trying Trump, A Guide to His First Election Interference Criminal Trial. About 10% of those go to jail, generally on Class E felonies, which this is the lowest level of felonies. About 30%, if you include all the Class E's, go to jail. So that's very important. Then you have the total defiance. He's completely unrepentant, Michael. Unlike you, who've said, look, I did it. I did a campaign finance crime. I'm sorry. I'm trying to straighten my life out. I broke with Donald Trump. Trump is he feels no remorse whatsoever. He went after court every day, and he had these press conferences just spewing the most heinous lies. There's no crime here. All the legal experts, the majority of the legal experts agree there is a crime here.
Right. So yeah, he's citing from George Washington University Law School, that guy, Jonathan Turdley, who is he's vying for some sort of a government position, the jerk off that he is. It's unbelievable. He's citing, people it's amazing. He's citing everyone one after the other. Anybody that says anything.
I have no comment. I have no comment on any of my former legal colleagues or current commentators. I will say that one of the craziest moments, maybe we'll talk about it, was when my teacher, he hired me, my first big criminal case, I've had so many since then, the Jonathan Pollard spy case. Alan Dershowitz came to court one day, and we had a bunch of conversations. I'll tell you about him in a minute. So number two, totally unrepentant. Number three, he violated the gag order 10 times. Number four, this is not more. This is not, but he was found, adjudicated. He was adjudicated to have done it 10 times. It's the court's findings.
Right.
Number four, he's had so many other crimes. And number five, if you just give him a slap on the wrist, he's going to say he won. And that's a big danger to our democracy. So I think for those 5 reasons, I wrote in the Times this week, he should be sentenced to jail. Now, I have great fairness in the great confidence in the fairness of this judge. So he's going to make his own decision what he thinks is right. And I don't know what he'll do. But I think Donald Trump should get a jail sentence. Why should you go to jail for all that time? And Donald Trump, you were in for what, a year and a half before they let you out?
13 months.
13 months, over a year.
And I spent 18 months in home confinement. In fact, I have 5 more months on supervised release. I haven't been given a single second off. But Donald violated the gag order again during his press conference, that last rambling, ridiculous press conference that he did at Trump Tower.
Yeah, but it's not working. We've seen in poll after poll that large numbers of independents, even some Republicans, are saying, I don't want to vote for a convicted felon. I just don't want to vote for a convicted felon. So because our presidential races tend to be decided by 40,000 to 80,000 voters in a group of three to five states out of a small pool of 7 swing states, this is very devastating to Donald Trump. Very, very, I think, very electorally devastating. And he knows that. And that's why you've seen this furious political response from him and the unified ranks of his followers in the Republican Party.
So, Norm, on top of that, Trump has now asked the Supreme Court of the United States to step in. Get a load of this. This guy has asked the Supreme Court to step in and to annul his sentence. The Supreme Court right now has its own credibility issues to deal with. But do you think that they can even step in to erase Trump's felony convictions? How would that even work?
No, they cannot. There's no legal basis to do it before he's gone through the intermediate appellate review in New York, which is going to take a year or two. And he's just speculating. It's not going to happen. If he tries, they'll throw it out as improvident, just like Hunter Biden tried to get the Third Circuit. And he actually, Hunter has a point. His prosecution, elements of the prosecution are probably going to be thrown out on constitutional grounds because some gun regulations are not legal after the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. I mean, the world has turned upside down. But the Third Circuit said, what are you doing? You're going out of order. You got to wait until, and the same with Trump. If he tries going to the Supreme Court, forget about it.
So what is Lumen? Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or you're burning carbs. And it gives you a tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, something I need badly, and even stress management. So let me tell you how Lumen works. All you have to do is you breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs. And then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on the measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after your workouts and your meals so that you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. So here's what Lumen does. Lumen provides crucial insights and helpful guidance for your lifestyle. It requires effort, though, and it also requires a lifestyle change to achieve results. Let me be clear. Lumen is not just a weight loss tool. It's about understanding and improving your metabolic health. So let me also tell you why metabolic health matters. It matters because your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimum metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. It can also track your cycle as well as the onset of menopause and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through hormonal shifts so that you can keep up your energy and stave off cravings. So if you want to take the next step to improving your health, go right now to lumen.me/Cohen to get 15% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/Cohen for 15% off your purchase. And thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Yeah. Well, good. Because now, you know what? While we're on the Supreme Court, it doesn't look like Alito's flag debacle is going away. I mean, the guy has like diarrhea of the mouth for whatever the reason may be, blaming his wife and so on. I mean, his failure to recuse himself from the January 6 cases, to me, the way I see it, it's ethically bankrupt. But how do we hold him accountable when he presumes himself, like many of the other Supreme Court justices, above the law?
Unlike what we saw in New York, Justice Alito is flying in the face of the core American principle. I mean, his bias is so outrageous. At him and Thomas, Alito's, is it a coincidence that the two most conflicted and compromised and corrupt Supreme Court justices are complicit in Donald Trump's effort to evade justice? They're openly stalling a decision on the 2020 election interference criminal case proceeding. They're delaying it. And they were the ones who wanted to hear this crazy lawsuit where Texas tried to throw out the votes in Pennsylvania. They were the two votes. I mean, it's so open. They're acting as the defense lawyers for Donald Trump. It's unbelievable. So, that's a weakness, Michael. The fact that there's no recourse shows that that's a danger and a weakness in our democracy, that we have created positions that are above the law. Now, there is a federal statute governing judicial conflicts that requires them to step away. But they're flouting it. They're defying it. They're like saying, make me. And Justice Roberts won't enforce the statute. It's outrageous. I mean, shows the degree of danger. We've slipped back to the time of King George III.
Norm, what's really interesting, growing up, whether it was history class in 5th grade or throughout high school, or then just reading various books and then going to law school and then practicing law, I always believed that our founding fathers were not from this earth, that they were actually put here, right? Because a document that they created, think about it, all my life I believed that the Constitution of the United States was like the 10 Commandments. It was just something that was perfect, that it was a document for all time, as a living, breathing document, until Donald Trump. This orange-crusted buffoon, this fucking Oompa Loompa moron, with all of his stupidity, opened up a Pandora's box and showed us that they were not as brilliant as I thought that they were, that there are holes in even the Constitution, that there are holes in the methodology that we have been existing for 259 years. Now, me personally, I never, even when I was in 5th grade, I had a debate with my teacher. I never liked the idea of anybody having a job for life. It just didn't make sense to me. The only person who has a job for life is a king or a dictator.
Yes.
And that was my comment to them. I never liked the idea. I don't like the idea that federal court judges have jobs for life, regardless of their inclination, regardless of their behavior. And this now is proof positive. Justice Thomas taking money from guys like Harlan Crow, Alito, flying the American flag upside down, and some of the other nonsense, or like Judge Eileen Cannon, with her decisions. This is not right. No one should have a job for life. I don't care. Somewhere along the line, we have to, as Americans, once all this bullshit settles and Trumpism is gone and this fascism ideology is gone, we need to change this. And I think, first of all, we need to change the fact that there are only 9 justices on the Supreme Court. I think we need to increase the size of the Supreme Court, and I think that there has to be term limits.
I won't disagree with you, but I'm going to ask you, not because I struggle with this. I've come to the same conclusion as you, but let me ask you this question, my friend. How will we avoid having a race to the bottom? How will we avoid having a race to the bottom where when Republicans get control, like let's say the Supreme Court is expanded to 13 with term limits, then they'll just expand it to 15 when they get control.
Let me give you the answer to that. You still need 66%. You need to have not just a majority, you have to have a supermajority. Make it that way, where Republicans and Democrats together decide for an increase. And that way, it is bipartisan, and it should be bipartisan.
But it won't be. You'll never get the increase if you do that. If you put that rule in. First of all, I am 100% sure. I have worked and lived in Congress, and you are not getting 66%. This will be done if and some Democrats will resist it. So it'll be done by one vote, by changing the filibuster and having one vote. I think it must be done. I'm just worried about, the Supreme Court's going to end up with 27 justices. Every new administration that comes in is going to add more. Another way to do it is by constitutional amendment, but I don't think we can get the constitutional amendment through. It doesn't matter, because even though there are downsides, the downsides of allowing the Supreme Court to run rampant over the American idea, starting with the idea that nobody is above the law, that can't be tolerated.
I agree.
We need to recognize we are looking at an autocratic movement in America.
Yep. So, all right, back to the Trump felonies, right? Of course, we already acknowledge that he's going to appeal the verdict. Can you do me a favor? Explain to my listeners what the appeals process might look like for Trump, and what do you think his chances of success are going to be?
I think the chances of success are extremely low. I think Judge Merchan did a good job. I think that the legal bases for his decision were thought through. As you know, I wrote my book in advance that had all of these legal questions and the relevant research, and what I thought the correct answers were. Judge Merchan scored 100, Michael, except sometimes he was too nice. He did too much for Donald Trump. So those jury instructions that resulted in the verdict, there was places like you didn't have to find that Donald Trump participated in the election conspiracy, just that he covered up a conspiracy, like between you and Pecker. Okay. But they said no. The judge took the tougher road. No, he instructed the jury, you got to find Donald Trump participated in the conspiracy. Wow. So there were a series of those that were much more favorable to the defense. This judge was so careful, so good, so fair. That angered me more than almost anything. As you know, I thought I was open about it. I thought that there were some failures on the part of even though I thought they did a basically good job, there were some big failures. I wrote about them on the part of the defense. The prosecution screwed up too. The Hoffinger examination of Stormy, the direct examination, she let Stormy go all over the map. It was the angriest I've seen the judge. Yeah. That was not a good. It was not a good moment. So I was candid about everybody's ups and downs.
Hey, can you do me a favor? By the way, since you're candid about everybody's ups and downs, rate my performance, not just in my demeanor, but more in terms of sum and substance of my responses.
Well, I'll say the same thing. I'll say the same thing I said on air. That number one, you were my first witness in the impeachment. By the way, I tried to get this to be a ground of the impeachment. I could not persuade my clients to go for the election conspiracy of 2016. But you've been truthful and consistent. it was a low moment in the, there were ups and downs in the cross, like in anything. But on the whole, what can you ask of a person? You did your best. It seemed to me you did your best to tell the truth. And sometimes your recollection was refreshed. That's normal. Clearly, the jury believed Michael Cohen and the judge believed Michael Cohen. So my opinion in the end of the day wasn't what mattered. The jury spoke by returning this verdict in a day and a half. And then the judge laughed the argument that the case should be thrown out because you lied. He gave it the back of the hand. I mean, I'll never forget that line. Are you saying I believe perjury? No, judge. No. Denied. Motion denied.
What are they claiming that I lied about?
They claimed that it was all a lie, even though it was heavily supported and corroborated. So, I don't think we should get into the specific moments, the ups and downs, and I don't think you should do it. I don't think it's, let the record speak for itself. But I will say the same thing that I said at the time, it's no secret that I thought the jury bonded with you over and over again. Mm-hmm. I saw you looking at the jury and then looking at you.
Yeah.
And that human connection, right? The human connection.
And there was one part, Norm, there was one part where I was talking about my family. And, that always makes my voice sort of crackle and so on. And I was talking about the damage that Donald and this scenario has caused my family. And there were two of the jurors had tears in their eyes. I could see it. They really sort of, bonded with me. And I gotta tell you, that probably wasn't a good moment because it came off of a Todd Blanche failed question when he was talking about, about me and, my family. And he opened up the door to give me that opportunity to really bond with the jurors. And I believe I did. And I believe that they are a perfect cross-section of not just New York, but of America, male, female, young, older, right? You had black, white, brown. You had Hispanic. You had, Jewish. You had, you had Christian, you Muslim. You had every cross section.
I'm not sure about the religion. I don't think that came out. I was there for every minute, and I listened to the questioning of the jury.
Oh, I don't think
the religion came out. Yeah, I know you shouldn't have been.
No,
you were. You as you testified, you were somewhat aware. You weren't following closely. The big question of this trial was, I was not of the view. There were some brilliant analysts who said, Michael Cohen, even the prosecution said he's a tour guide. No, I said on the air, no, Michael Cohen is essential to this case. You did not have proof beyond a reasonable doubt before his testimony. You did have it after.
Oh,
and now there were two star witnesses, and we saw this in the jury's question, the bookends. David Pecker, Michael Cohen. Pecker was an extremely important witness because, like you, he's somebody from Trump world who had the closest relationship. And like you, he broke with, unlike you, he still likes Trump. That was powerful when he said he still admired him. He considered his mentor. The two of you together, and you saw that in the jury's questions, Michael, because they asked for your testimony about Trump Tower and David's testimony. But I don't think you had a case without Michael Cohen. And then to have the judge and jury speak so forcefully, that's a verdict of history. And you and I have talked about this. The funny thing is, people sometimes ask me, what do you talk to Michael about? I'm like, just watch Mea Culpa. Just listen to Mea Culpa. It's like the exact same conversation that we do on the podcast.
Right.
So I often say to Michael Cohen, maybe we should invite him to be with us on another one, Michael. I say, Michael, you're this generation's John Dean, okay? And your position in this trial gives you that role and responsibility. It's a different generation. You're a much more, shall we say, colorful personality, right? John is of the West. He's a different character. You're of New York. That's a different but I'm privileged to call both of you friends, and I think that the commonalities are important. And as you really took your place in American history. The same way when they write about Nixon and Watergate, they show that picture of John Dean testifying in the Watergate committee. They're going to show the artist sketches of you testifying with Trump's face down in the corner and the judge, the sketch artists do it with everybody's faces. So your testimony was really one for the history books. That's why I was so honored when you said, "Hey, will you do my first podcast after the trial?"
That's right. You are my first.
So honored.
Hey, let me ask you this though.
I was honored. The historians will be listening to this podcast.
That's right, forever. I like when they played the podcast and so on, and it said, revenge is a dish best served cold, and I want to see this motherfucker in prison. And the jury started laughing. Not a smart move by the defense at all, right? I mean,
They were trying to contrast. They were trying to contrast your dignified demeanor on the stand with your colorful personality. I agree that it didn't work, but you know what, Michael? I'm glad they hit you with all their best shots because Trump cannot argue. They did. And it was the cross-examination had its ups and downs. Trump cannot argue that you were not tested. He cannot argue he did not have good lawyering. He cannot argue the jury did not get a chance to see Michael Cohen in full. And they embrace you in full, including all those colorful things that you do.
But that's not really fair, Norm. That's not really fair. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why.
Go ahead.
Take a guy like, I'm just going to use as an example, Liev Schreiber, the actor.
Yeah.
Right? Ray Donovan is probably a lead most people know Liev Schreiber for.
Yeah.
Right? From everybody who I know who knows him, and I know a few people who know him, he's really this super nice guy. He's very calm, cool, and collect. Just because his persona is a guy walking around with a baseball bat, beating the piss out of people, right? Throwing them over the side of a bridge. That's not who he is.
But now, he's Michael.
But you can have a persona, right? As I do here on Mea Culpa, political beatdown.
Yeah, but I know the real. I consider myself fortunate. We're friends. I know the real Michael Cohen. You have both. Those are two sides of your personality. You got a colorful side. You got a menschy side. Okay, that's the real Michael Cohen. That's like Norm. Sometimes I'm soft-spoken. Sometimes I get exercise. That's not a persona. That's me. And the jury met my friend, both sides of my friend Michael Cohen, and they embraced it. And that made me happy that they accepted you for who you were. They believed you just like me when I came to meet you. I came back. I told Jerry Nadler. I was on a podcast with him recently, or a press conference. He said some very nice things. I came back. I told Jerry, I'm like, Jerry, Michael Cohen is the most important witness. He's a truth teller, and you have never wavered one iota since 2019, since your congressional testimony, our many conversations, your books. You never wavered one iota. And that was the biggest takeaway from me from this jury. Just like Judge Engoron, Michael Cohen told the truth. And they felt you told the truth.
So let me ask you this then. All right. Let's talk about for a second the effects a felony has on the average person. Because I talked about this where, I talked about it the other day on MSNBC with Rachel and Nicole Wallace and Joy Reid and Chris Hayes, myself, and Danya Perry, my lawyer, was with us at the time. And I turned around and I talked about, and then again on Nicole's show, One-on-One, the effects that a felony has on the average person. You lose your banking relationships. You lose so much. There are real and definite restrictions that are placed on you as a felon. Do you think that the consequences are going to or are not going to apply to Trump because of whether it's his wealth, his status? What do you think about that?
No, the consequences already apply, Michael. We're seeing poll after poll. This is the most devastating consequence, where around 50% of independents are saying, I can't vote for a convicted felon. And he's a democracy felon, right? Attacking vote. Right. He's deceiving voters to grasp power and covering it up. I mean, so he's already suffering the consequence. He's going to have travel limitations. He's going to have gun ownership limitations. He can't visit certain countries. Those consequences are real. And why do you think we're seeing such a furious counterattack full of lies from him? He's taken over the whole Republican Party. Do you even recognize the Republican Party that you used to belong to?
I was never a Republican. I've been a Democrat my entire life.
Well, you did. You were the finance chair of the RNC.
Right. And when I first started,
what was your exact title, your finance title?
I was the co-chair of the RNC Finance Committee.
Yeah.
But when I first started and was given that role under the incredible and great Steve Wynn, I was a Democrat. And when they found out about it, they were like, yeah, you cannot be the co-finance chair of the RNC Finance Committee as a registered Democrat. And so they changed my party affiliation. And then after the election, I went and I changed it back.
Do you still admire Steve Wynn?
I do. I do. I do have a lot of, first of all, he's an incredible guy. I've always liked him. And I enjoyed very much. I'm disappointed that I really don't speak to him anymore. There's a few people that this.
Who are the others? Who are the others?
Guys like Ike Perlmutter and his wife Lori Perlmutter.
Marvel,
they're big,
the owner of Marvel. Yeah.
Yep, they're big Trump supporters. There's a whole slew of people.
Interesting.
That I just don't speak to or hear from anymore. Including a lot of guys that I used to work with at the Trump organization.
Yeah, who you still like.
Yeah, my old colleagues. Alan Garten, for example, was there in the courthouse. I mean, we were very, very close, for 10 years.
The general counsel and the special counsel.
Yeah. So, hey, let me ask you this then, questions. How do you see those restrictions affecting the presidency? I mean, if God forbid he was ever to get back into the White House, how do you think that those restrictions?
I'm having a friendly debate about that with my most senior in-house constitutional expert. There's going to be a debate about whether any of those restrictions can be enforced if Donald Trump wins. That's why I wrote in the New York Times, not this month, last month, I wrote in the New York Times that the election just became a referendum on whether Donald Trump is above the law or not. Because there'll be an argument that OLC will make the Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice that no conditions of Donald Trump's conviction can be applied while he's president if they interfere with the operation of his presidential office under the Constitution. The Constitution never contemplated that we would have a criminal president. So it's all about what's implied under the constitutional terms. So we're going to have to think that through. The most important issue is that question doesn't need to be put to me, Michael. Put it to the American people, the many, many who listen to this podcast. I think some of the jurors said they listened to your podcast and followed you. Yeah. So they're going to decide in November, thanks to your truthful testimony. Nobody will ever understand what Michael has gone through to do his public service. And just to tell the truth, how hard that is. But thanks to you, the other witnesses, the judge, all the lawyers, including the defense lawyers, and above all, the jury. Now the American people get to make a choice. And they're going to choose the answer to that question. I think probably the Constitution, there's a very substantial argument that the Constitution blocks it, but there's an argument the other way that we're going to unpack. And, I have to really do the analysis. Now, I haven't done the analysis. Got to go all the way back to the debates, the founding debates on the Constitution.
Yeah. Hey, you brought up that poll, and I want to jump into that for a quick second, that Ipsos poll.
Yeah, Reuters, Ipsos, right?
Yeah. So what was incredible is that 11%, according to this poll, 11% of registered Republicans said that they will not vote for Donald Trump if he is found guilty of these convictions, of these allegations. That's now 34 counts, that they would not vote for him. Let's just even say hypothetically that number is not accurate. It's too high, it's not legitimate and so on. Okay, let's cut it in half. Even if it's 5 or 6%, that takes him out of the race altogether. But it wasn't 50% of independents. It was 65% of independents. Between 50 to 65% of Americans think that he's guilty. But 65% of independents said that they would not vote for him if there was a conviction. So you take that number with the 5%. Let's even say it's 30% or 35% of the independents. He can't win just based on the numbers. Cannot. In fact, if you really start breaking the numbers down, it's going to look like a complete ass whooping.
Yes. That's how it is right now, right? But we know this election is going to be decided by maybe 40, maybe 80, maybe 100,000 people in a handful of states. That's what we should be looking at. And I believe these numbers, the worst numbers for Donald Trump are, first of all, it shores up those Nikki Haley Republicans who just don't like him, right? He's not going to get every Republican. If he loses 10% of Republicans in those 3 to 5 states, he's dead.
Dead.
Then you got it dead. But then you filter in half of independents. So the problem is, the President Biden's having some challenges of his own, right? He should be 10 points ahead of Donald Trump. And,
So can I jump in for a second, Norm?
I want to make one more point. The double haters, the ones who don't like them both, are also, if you look at the polls, are also very adversely affected by the convicted felon.
Right.
But we're also a long way away from the election. So I think it will be a factor.
See, I think Biden is ahead by 10 points. And you're going to say, what?
No.
I believe that he is ahead by 10 points. In fact, hold on. Ready for this? Ready for the basis of my belief? I believe it's the media. That is conflating these numbers, and that they are intentionally playing with the numbers. You know why? Right now, Norm, if right now the conversation on the street was that Biden is ahead by 10 points, nobody would watch the news. And they'd lose all their advertisers and so on, and that that it wouldn't be this sort of like, oh my God,
there's no media conspiracy, Michael. There's not a media conspiracy to make up the results of 100 polls.
Yes.
Everybody who's polling it, no, friends. You're truly getting a view. Everybody should go. The only thing that's missing is they're not having a bourbon with us, Michael. You're truly getting a view. We agree, we disagree, we laugh, we cry, but I totally disagree. It is an excruciatingly close race. I think that this puts Biden ahead. Don't look at the national polls. That doesn't matter. That's not the American system. In our electoral college, 3 to 5 states out of a group of 7 states, 3 to 5 of them are going to decide this, and the race is very likely going to be decided by fewer Americans than you can put into a Big Ten football stadium, fewer than you can put into the Rose Bowl.
Now, let's just say I disagree with that one.
Well, we can agree
to. And you know what? We'll see. We'll see in another 5.5 months.
You think Biden's going to win? He's not going to win by 10 points.
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be a much bigger margin than you think. I think between Roe versus Wade, I think between his racist comments.
Well, let me make you just made a very important point, because you're tying together. This case is about Donald Trump was convicted as a felon by a jury of everyday Americans, as you point out, his peers, after he was indicted by a grand jury of everyday Americans. He was convicted after a very tough, effective defense case for deceiving voters to win an election. If he'll deceive the voters, if he's convicted of voter deceit to win an election, he'll deceive the voters on abortion. He'll deceive the voters on any issue. So the voters need to know he's lying to you.
Yeah, until you start to see all the ads coming out about young women turning around and talking about the fact that they nearly died, and you see some very powerful ads. And you know what? People like you, Norm, and myself, I'm getting out there, and I'm going to keep hammering it home as the father of a daughter, right? As an uncle to a whole slew of nieces. Bullshit. There's no way in the world that young women today you cannot lie to them and tell them that, don't worry, just because Roe's been overturned and you can't get mifepristone, you can't get the day after pill because Donald and his Supreme Court and his evangelical, sycophantic followers, that they have not put a stop and taken away your rights to the point that you have less rights than your grandmother. And so on. There's no way he's going to be able to bullshit that. But I want to ask you something also, because I have a lot of family that live overseas. And I'm curious how you see right now the United States viewed internationally, right? Especially for holding a former president accountable and being held accountable 34 times. I mean, how do you think that this verdict is affecting the global perception of America and our legal system?
Positively. Everybody knows that democracy is not perfect. They're struggling through it, okay? So, many countries have shared our struggle, Michael. So this shows, hey, for all its flaws, American democracy still works. And you have the voters. That's what's so unique. In other countries, they don't have juries. In America, you have the voters. Just like to go to the ballot box, you pick a representative group of voters, of American people. It's the most democratic justice system in the world. And if they could not persuade the voters that Donald Trump covered up caused the falsification of 34 business records, to cover up a voter deception conspiracy under New York law with unlawful means, if they could not persuade the American people of that, and that Michael Cohen told the truth, then the case would have failed. Right. And that is, the world sees that and they're like, oh my God. Oh my God. So I think it's great for America. And obviously, the rest of the world knows Donald Trump is a autocratic character because they've seen these would-be dictators, right? Yeah. They recognize what he is, and I think the American people now that he's a convicted felon for deceiving voters, he ripped off every American with this conspiracy. Now that he's convicted, and God bless you for breaking with him and coming out and saying, yes, I did it. It was a crime. I did it with him.
Not easy. It would have been easier for me to have stayed in that fold, done my time, come out. I'd probably be with Laura Trump.
You'd be pardoned.
Running the
You'd be pardoned. Yeah, you'd be pardoned. You'd be in that parade, right? Yep. There never would have been a case without you.
No. Hey, Norm, let me ask you this then, because staying on this international belief, right?
Yeah.
Nevertheless, while all this is going on with the convictions and so on, they're still watching people like special counsel Jack Smith get kicked in the nuts by Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has made people worried that MAGA has control over important parts of the judiciary. In general, do you think that our court system is now completely compromised?
No. The court system is... You can't let a few bad apples like Judge Loose Cannon cast aspersions on the whole system. The system works. The Trump conviction proves it works. That's why I'm so, I feel so strongly that Trump threw everything he had at the system, in court, out of court, and he couldn't shake the system. That's the strongest endorsement you could ask for of the system. Most judges... They're not all as good as Judge Merchan. They're very good. Cannon may be the worst federal judge, or the worst judge in America. She's so obviously, but the fact that there's three terrible, terrible judges in the country, Judge Cannon, Judge Alito, Thomas, Justices Alito and Thomas, Judge Kaczynski in Texas, Judge Doty. There's a handful. There's less than 10.
Judge William H. Pauley III.
Well, I don't agree about Pauley. No. I don't agree. I don't agree.
Yeah,
I don't agree about Pauley. That was the weakest part of your testimony when you said that was the weakest part of your testimony when you said Pauley was in a conspiracy.
He was. He absolutely was.
Friends, you see.
Hey,
Michael doesn't listen. He doesn't listen to all my views. Wait a minute. He's dead. Drop Judge Pauley. He's dead. It doesn't matter. You know what matters? Judge Cannon is perverting justice. She is so biased and distorted. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, they don't deserve the name justice. And you're getting at a very good point, which is a handful of corrupt justices and judges at this point have perverted the federal cases because they slowed down the checking case. Michael, Alvin Bragg said that case 2020 election interference can go before 2016 election interference. But the Supreme Court justices have slowed it down. Why is there a need to take 5 months to decide if Donald Trump can send SEAL Team 6 for political assassinations under the doctrine of presidential immunity? That's insane. That should have been dismissed in 15 seconds.
I agree. It's beyond insane. So look, Norm, the hour comes by and it goes by real fast here. I can talk to you, for 100 hours. I have one last question for you.
Yes.
Right? And this is a doozy. What do you know about the CNN?
Fastening my seatbelt.
Please do. Because what do you know about the CNN dust-up between my friend, who I have the world of respect for, George Conway, and the jerk-off Scott Jennings? I mean, George went out there and he called out Scott Jennings for lying while they were discussing the Trump guilty verdict. But why has that upset folks over at CNN? I talk to some of the hosts of CNN. I don't even, other than like Erin Burnett, I don't even want to go on CNN. They think that they're like Fox Light right now. Shouldn't we all be calling out the liars? I can't tell you, when they have on CNN assholes, total assholes, like they have Ty Cobb, fucking jerk off. Right? When they have...
He's a very good friend of mine.
Ty Cobb is an asshole. And you have Bill Barr on CNN.
He's not an asshole.
He's the total asshole. And by the way, he has a very contrarian view on this case. I disagree with him. We've had many conversations. He's a good man. Let me answer your question this way.
CNN, the claim that CNN, that there's some kind of bias, they ran as the leading story the confrontation with George. George is a very dear friend of mine, Michael. So I have to confess, we shared an office for this trial, right? We had a mini law firm for 6 weeks. We shared an office next door to the court, but they ran. Don't knock CNN because they ran, and my bias, I'm on CNN. They let me articulate my views. They brought me on to strongly say Michael Cohen told the truth. So CNN has never tried. They had me on every day. They ran the George confrontation with Scott. They ran it at the top of the CNN website for days.
They bring on folks like Bill Barr, like Ty Cobb.
It's a different model.
Like that slob of the hut. What's his name? The one, Bill Brennan, whatever his name is. That slob of the hut.
Doesn't he look like
Jabba the Hutt with that fat fucking neck of his sitting there? Oh, Michael Cohen, he's going to be this. He's going to be that. Bullshit.
I am not.
Let me tell you, CNN better get their shit together because as far as I'm concerned, they're bringing on Trumpers, like guys like what the hell is his name again? Jason Miller, right? And so what do you think that these folks are going to say? They're going to sit there and question. They don't have any information. All they're doing is spewing lies. And good for George Conway in kicking Scott Jennings right in the nutsack.
But in every one of those examples, I saw many of those examples, alternative points of view were presented. Like I have debated Jim Trusty. I've debated Parlatore. So you can't criticize. He's a good guy, Parlatore. Asshole. You can't criticize. Well, I don't. You and I don't agree on everything. And we don't agree on this. Asshole. You can't criticize. I love you, but I disagree.
Could you imagine, like, Todd Blanche starts out his cross-examination? Mr. Cohen, do we know each other? No, sir. So he goes, well, on your podcast, you turn around and you called me a lying, what do you call it? Like a sniveling piece of shit. And I was like, sounds like something I would say, right? And then the judge got all pissed off. Why are you making this about you? Well, it was Parlatore, you got Ty Cobb, you got, Bill Brennan, you got Turdley, you got Jason Miller, you got all of them. Fuck you all. How's that? Lying bunch of assholes. Staying on that, Donald von Schitzenpants.
All right. I completely disagree with all of that. But even if sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree.
All right. So I still love you, Norm. You're the best.
I love you.
Kicking Scott Jennings' ass. Norm, you're the best. Thank you, as always. Thank you for being my very first interview back, right? Because my supporters are going to love this one. Appreciate you, my brother.
God. And I appreciate you.
I'll be speaking to you offline very soon.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, pal.